Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, episode 167. And as you notice, Ben's not with us here tonight. He's still in the midst of doing his relocating and setting up for that. He could possibly join us later on tonight. That's yet to be seen. But who we do have here with us tonight is a gentleman that I've been advertising on our episodes here, and you folks have reached out and said that you were really interested in this topic. And his name is Jamie Harris. And Jamie Harris is the owner-operator of Bluefish Knife and Tools. Facebook group going for the last 3 years is where I pulled the information. But Jamie, you've been at it actually longer than that, haven't you, sir?
I have, yes. It's been going for, I've been making knives and doing leather work to complement that for going on 6 years now. So it's pretty much. I started Facebook group and my Instagram about 3 years ago.
And
Went
that's
on
when
from
I
there.
really took notice off it too, to be honest with you. And a lot of people of us did because social media is just that. It's a great way to get stuff out, expands your presence on the interweb or intraweb, as you say. And that's really where I peaked, or where you piqued my interest as well. But that wasn't actually the first time I heard of Jamie, and I guess I should back up a little bit. If anybody is wondering and just listening to this out there because they weren't able to join us for this live session, Jamie Harris actually does metalworking and leatherworking, just as he mentioned there, and he does some wonderful pieces for some knives, and it's not just bushcrafting knives and stuff like that. You've done kitchen knives, and I've seen cleavers and other works of metal that are just absolutely beautiful, and then you do the leather work to go along with them. And I have shown
Yeah.
it on many podcasts for our video viewers there. In the past, Jamie was actually kind enough to do this piece for one of the knives I had, and this was what he claimed at the time was, oh yeah, that's simple work right there. I'll bang that off for you, no problem. But it's super nice. The stitching's great. The embroidering on it's amazing, and it's held up amazingly well. I wear this every time I go into the woods, and I mean, I don't treat it well. Sorry, Jamie, but I mean, I use it like a sheath. It takes a lot of abuse, and it just keeps on ticking. So amazing work, and I just can't say enough good stuff about it, which was one of the big reasons I reached out to Jamie here. But yeah, sorry, backing up. 3 years ago wasn't when Jamie and I first met. The first time Jamie and I actually met, if I'm not mistaken, was the first Nova Scotia Bushcraft gathering, which was in 2009. So that's actually, like 11 years ago now, something like that. It'll be 11 years
Yeah,
in
getting
August,
handy around
maybe?
there somewhere. Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any plans for this year for the Nova Scotia Bushcraft Gathering. We always try to throw a shout out to there and Lawrence and you and those. Uh, any plans that you know of, or nothing you can talk about at this point?
I think COVID's still having a little lingering issue there, but there is talk of something going on. So hopefully, it's always a good time to get out and meet up with everybody. We've had quite a few gatherings now. It's always good to get out and get out with everybody. It's great opportunity to share what's been going on, and since the pandemic here, you just want to see everybody you've been missing for the last few years.
And we
So it's a possibility.
Okay, and we'll leave it at that for now. If anything changes, as some of our listeners out there know, I still frequent the Nova Scotia Bushcraft Facebook page. So if anything changes, definitely check out the information there. You can go on Facebook, check them out. That's Nova Scotia Bushcraft. And Jamie's page, if you want to look that up, Facebook, Bluefish Knife and Tool. And I think you're the only one that comes up when you search that name. And you can see some of the work that you've done on there as well.
Yeah, and it's Bluefish6900 on Instagram.
Okay, I didn't have
Yep.
your Instagram, so that's good there. So getting back to the topic at hand, Jamie. So you said you've been into metalwork, leatherwork, 6 years, somewhere in around there, and it must have started as a hobby, did it?
Yes. As far as the knives and stuff and leatherwork, yeah, it started out as a hobby. To back up, I was a machinist as a trade school, so that's how I got into metalwork. So I've always been, into the fussier, detailed stuff. So that's kind of where a lot of it comes from. But as far as the knife part of it, I needed I have a father that if he needs something, he goes and gets it himself. So you can't always buy something for Christmas. So I decided I was going to build him a knife for Christmas one year, basically, and that's kicked everything off. Making him a knife. After I made a knife, I had to learn how to do leather to make a sheath for it. So that kind of spurred it all out, all trial by fire, I guess. So.
And that is kind of a funny point. I guess the two, I never thought about that actually up to this point. I suppose the leatherworking and metalwork kind of go hand in hand. Not to say if you do one, you have to do the other, but I guess it's a big advantage, I would assume, is it?
Well, it is because there's a lot of knife makers that don't do leather. So when you can go to a one-stop shop, and so it's not too bad when you gotta sell in a kitchen knife or something. I mean, I like to put them in a Kydex sheath just as a drawer protector. As far as a kitchen knife, if you're going sole kitchen knife, but as far as a hunting knife, you don't want to send out a hunting knife that's not in leather, right? You spend that much for that much of an investment for a hunting knife, and they got to carry it in their pocket when they get it. It's kind of should have something, right? And if it's going to be in something, you should be in something nice. So.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And like I said, I've mentioned it numerous times in old podcasts and stuff like that about this leather sheath. Actually, I think I drew attention to it within the first 5 episodes that we actually did.
Yeah.
And I constantly refer back to it. And that's one of the things I say is if you do have a nice knife and a knife you like, sometimes the sheaths that come with it, they fail. And you have to look for somebody with your skills that can actually, make you a good sheath. Because just like you said, if the sheath falls apart, you're not just going to carry the thing in your pants pocket. It's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, could you imagine my knife here, which is about a 6-inch blade on it? That's not going to fit in my jeans so well.
No, I mean, you can get creative. You can heat up some ABS pipe and make your own Kydex sheath and stuff like that. But it's not quite the same, right?
You can't beat a good leatherworking sheath. And I do stress the word good, because I have had some poor ones, don't get me wrong. Just one, like you buy them off the shelf kind of dealios. You see, oh yeah, you're going to make a knife to fit that. Because that's the leatherworking I do. If I have a knife and the sheath fails, well, now I call somebody like you. Previously, I would just find an old sheath that kind of fit the knife, and I know a lot of our listeners out there will do the same thing, and you make it work. And it'll work for a while. Absolutely, but the quality is just never there compared to the stuff you use here. It's a nice thick leather. It's rolled by the looks of it. Where do you get some of your supplies, Jamie, if I can ask that, bud?
I get most of it at Tandy Leather, and they're available online. I use shop at the shop in Dartmouth, and other than that, I make my own tools. So
once again, a benefit to doing both sides of the coin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to get into the leather work, which we might as well start right at point A here. Let's say I'm new to wanting to do some metal work. What is some things, as somebody that knows very little, I could start doing to lead me down the right path? Like where would you start if somebody wanted to make their own knife?
It's when I started, I didn't have all the gear that I have now. I mean, I started basically with I did have access to a bandsaw, but a hacksaw, a file, a Sharpie marker, a torch of some sort, and some oil, and you can get pretty basic, right?
So by the sounds of it,
that's going way basic, but yeah, I mean you can do it.
But I mean that's perfect. And that's the ability or the level that some people would have to start this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you gotta start somewhere, and when people are interested in it, what do I say? You just get started. Don't get hung up on the gear. The gear can come later. You're going to find out what you need. I mean, after I filed all my bevels on the first few knives, after that I went to just a belt sander, a 3x24 Delta sander, right? Stuck it upside down in a vise and ground it that way. I mean, nothing was very perfect, but it can be done. Then you just build up after you figure out what you want, and you get fussier. So,
okay, let me ask this: what are some good metals to start out with? What's something common I might have laying around that I might be able to use? Because I know once you get into the higher end stuff, you're obviously going to be getting bar metal or something like that with specific metal properties for the project you're working on. But Joe Blow me, I'm going to the garage. What am I going to start hacking up and do a knife?
Oh, well, first thing, find some old files. Start off with an old file of some sort. It's going to be pretty hard. You're not going to be able to file it. Take it, grab it, throw it in the campfire overnight, get it nice and hot and let it cool down, and you should be able to work at it from there.
So what does that do to it, if you don't mind me asking, heating it up and letting it cool down like that?
It's an annealing process. It's not perfect, but it should get you in the right ballpark. Basically, you're taking the hardened steel and you're bringing it up to critical temperature and letting it cool slow, so it's annealing it. You're basically getting it softer.
And
So
this is
the slow cooling is the process you're looking for.
so that's going to get it down to where you can actually work with it. So from
Yeah,
there, you would
exactly.
use like a grinder or something on it.
You can grinder. You should be able to file it. You should be able to drill it. Whereas as in a hardened state in the file, you're not going to be able to file a file, right?
And that makes total sense, you know. I suppose. Is there any specific reason you use a file? Is it just the hardness off it? Is it just a good
Well,
alloy to work with?
a file is made for cutting steel, so that's basic. You can use a grinder. I say filed. That's my machinist background. You can get nice, clean, flat surfaces with a file if you know what you're doing. I mean, you can use a bench grinder. You're gonna, it's a little bit rougher, but it works. All right, you can just use whatever. You just got to take metal off, right? Get the profile you want. You get your shape. You get your bevels the way that you want them. Put a couple of holes in for stick some pins in there and glue some wood on it. That's basically what a knife is, except for the hardening part. So
And that's fair. Now, there's two things that you said that I'd like to question there. You keep saying bevel, and if I know what a bevel is, but how do you set the bevel? Because I think that's the hardest part that a lot of people have with knives, and
oh,
something I
for
struggle with
sure.
too is getting a decent bevel or the proper angle or whatever you want to call it. Everything I do is always lopsided. Cuts to the right, great. Not so good to the left.
Yeah, well, that's all practice. But I mean, if you can start off with a fairly straight piece of metal, you got to draw. You take a Sharpie. Well, you do your profile, so the outside of the knife. You do your after you get your right shape. You put a Sharpie down it, and you try to get a line down the middle, line on the side of how you want your bevel to go, and then you just work to that. You stay within the lines.
Actually,
Just like
sounds really
color,
simple. I never thought of
just
it before. I've
just
always
kind of
tried
coloring,
freehand.
right? Yeah. Well, I mean, if you could have good light and something to work to, and I mean, I got bad eyesight, so I got little cheater goggles here now, and do what I got to do. But
And that's just it. You do what you got to
yeah,
do. So you get the bevel. You said template, I think, as well. Do you freehand your templates, or do you use ready-made templates, or do you draw templates in your spare
I
time? And
actually I actually do everything on the computer now. So
okay, so like
I
AutoCAD or something like that, I assume.
yeah, it's all actually called Inkscape. It's a free program. You just sit there and basically you put a couple dots and you start manipulating stuff around. And so if say you wanted a knife and you say I want these parameters, I can put whatever it in. And the benefit of that is after I got it drawn, I can zip it over to you. You can look at it. You can actually print it out full size, cut it out, put it in your hand, look at it. No, this has got to be a little bit bigger. That's got to be a little bit bigger. I can sit there in 5 minutes, modify it, send it back to you. So that's the part of the custom knife I like, right? So
And that's actually a real good point. I've told the story before. I have had previous experience, and you know this story too. And there's names involved in here, and I request not to mention the names just out of respect. But I have had experience trying to get a custom knife made in the past. It didn't work out, and that was one of the problems there. I was giving my information on the knife I wanted, but I wasn't getting anything back that I could possibly make changes to. You know what I mean? I had to take pictures of knives I had and said I like this part of this knife, and I'd rather this part of that knife go to here with about this long with a handle shape like this. And basically, I tried to draw it out, not being an artist, and I sent that forward to this individual, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll try to make you something like that." And that, what their interpretation of my drawing was, and what the final
yeah,
product could have been, it was,
yeah,
it was a heyday there.
yeah, exactly.
So
I mean, there's a point in where a lot of people get to that they're custom knife maker, but they don't necessarily take the orders that the customer wants. They build what they want, right? And I mean that's fair. I mean everybody's allowed to do what they want, basically. But I'm still at the point where I want to make you happy, and I want to push myself at the same time. So if it puts me out of my comfort zone, I gotta wrap my head around it, and it's just gonna put me a little. It's going to raise my skill level, basically, right? That's the way I look at it.
And that kind of makes sense. When you, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
There is some areas that I don't go down yet. It's just for whatever reason, but yeah, that's.
Oh, you can't say something like that and not enlighten us a little bit, Jamie. I won't torment you, but that's okay. But we may come back to that. We may come back to that. So yeah, the technology on that has really come forward a lot with knife makers like yourself and other blacksmiths and stuff like that. And would you consider yourself the quote unquote knife maker, or would you prefer the title blacksmith? Like what is your profession?
I think I'm a knife maker.
Okay.
Well, I'm not a blacksmith by any means. As far maybe you can go to bladesmith. Bladesmith, I say bladesmith. Bladesmith, I categorize it where you're taking your like a round bar and you're flattening it out, and making you're pounding. You're doing a lot more work with a hammer.
Okay.
Right? To get to roughly the same point. Is there any advantage? There can be an advantage between the two, but I call myself a knife maker since I'm starting a lot more with bar steel, which in the end there's no real advantage as far as for what you want. You'll get what you want one way or another. Just how you get there is the little journey, right?
And that's a fair point. And I never thought about it stuff in that manner. Like I assumed you would use flat bars of steel. I guess I shouldn't say I assumed. Actually I did. I assumed you'd use flat bars of steel. But I guess that does take a lot of the work out of it from the other side if you're not pounding flat. It's already flat, so you just got to find the right thickness and work from there.
Well, kinda, yeah. Here, I'm going to show you something. Just hold on here.
Yeah, sure, no worries. So yes, anybody out there that's listening, once again, that's Bluefish Knife and Tool. Check it out on Facebook, and Jamie's a great guy, as you can tell from the story here. So, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so let's see if I can show you here. Where's the camera?
All right.
Okay, this is all one piece of steel. Basically, it's an integral kitchen knife. So it's all pounded out from one piece of steel. So you can see that it's a little wider here, goes down, and then you got your bevel going down, your profile going down, and you got your tang on this side. So this would be bladesmithing. This is what I call bladesmithing, right? I pounded this out with Peter LePay here a few weeks ago. Him and I are good buddies. LePay Knife and Tool. He's more of a blacksmith on the blade or bladesmith, and he hammers and knives and axes and everything else. But
just a point of interest there. If anybody's ever seen my Basics of Fire, the first one there where I was talking about the striker I had, it was actually Peter that made it for me. So shout out to Peter. I mentioned him in the past as well, but good call. Anyway, sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that was made from a round bar. So that's on the bladesmithing side of it. But mostly what I do is starting with a flat bar and going from there. So.
But now that you've done something like that, you've added that to your repertoire of skills, so it's something you'd be at least comfortable attempting again, correct?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I think that skill is now in your pocketbook, man. I think you could work up to bladesmith off that. I don't know, maybe I was... But, yeah, so your templates and stuff like that, for Joe Blow like me, I can't draw. Is there resources where I'd be able to find that stuff online? I've never actually tried. I tried freehanding a couple knives, and it looked like my little girl did it, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah,
you give me a
there is actually, there's a guy in Alberta. His name is Dan Camo, and he has a world of knowledge on his website. And he actually has 4 or 5 different huge pages of templates where you can go and you can print them out. Each different style is actually different lengths and everything else. So you can go there, you can look at it, print it out, and copy it out, cut it, glue it to a piece of steel, work to it. It's pretty easy. You can take 2 or 3 of them, take this piece you like, that piece you like, glue them together or whatever. You can. Opportunities are endless. So.
Okay, well that's good. Well, once again, new to it. Not something I would have thought of, to be honest with you. I thought you had to be able to draw to be able to do this stuff, or find a knife or something like that. I know you can get basic templates, I'm going to call it. It looks like clip art. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But no, it's kind of interesting. You get more advanced stuff like that, and I wouldn't have thought of cutting them and pasting them together either. I would have tried to have done it in my head, and the
Yeah,
simplest option is usually the best.
yeah. And with Dan Camo's website, which is DC Knives, you just Google DC Knives and they'll get you there. But on there, there's if you want to build your own tools, you want to make your own grinder, you want to make your own oven, you want to do all kinds of stuff. That's what he does, and that's what he catalogs on his website. So it's wealth of knowledge.
Okay. I was just looking on the old Google machine there. Is he District Cutlery, or is it just DC Knives Facebook page?
DC Knives. No, it's not. It's not a Facebook page.
Okay.
So
I see DCKnives.com. There is an online.
I think it's .com.
Let's see. It does. And we have wonderful technology here, but the name's going to be wrong. So, everybody, Ben is Jamie, because I never changed it over on this one. But is this the actual webpage you were talking about?
Yep, it is. And if you actually look on the red text or the orange text on the right there, you can actually see all the different topics that he went through. And there's knife templates and walkthroughs of building different machines and all that kind of stuff. So that's another part of the craft that I really enjoy is I don't buy my machines, I build them. So it's all, well, a lot of times I have more fun building machines than I do building knives. So it's.
But that's part of the hobby, right? It's part of the interest and what keeps you involved.
That's right.
Now, when you say build your machines, what's an example of a machine you would have built for yourself?
Let me see.
And I know I'm putting you on the spot here. This isn't a question we talked about. So.
Let me see if I can show you here. There's one.
So what are we looking at there, Jamie?
That's a belt grinder.
Okay. So how would you have manufactured that? It looks like you made some sort of body, bolted it to your bench, attached some sort of motor?
Yep, it's actually a 220 3-phase motor. So I got 220 in my shop, and I got a little fancy machine in a box back there that takes single phase, turns it to 3-phase, then you can variable speed it. So
nice. Now, what's the?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I know a lot of people that make knives. A belt sander is like up there on their list of must-haves once you start getting serious about it. What's the benefit to a belt sander versus like a grinder or something like that?
Well, the belt sander is a belt grinder basically, but what this
I guess an angle
doing,
grinder is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, this is going to do the same thing. It's going to keep it cooler. It's going to be more precise, and the functions that you got to do is you can put the attachments on these. Where an angle grinder, you're cutting on a little radius all the time, right? You can cut with it, or you can sand it off, and it's always a little radius. With these here, you got a lot more abrasive. You got 72 inches going around and 2 inches wide. So the longer the belt, the cooler it's going to stay. And so you're not going to be, if you're working with a hardened steel, you don't want to overheat it to ruin the temper in it. So and you can get a lot, the abrasives you can get for these is unreal now. So.
Okay. Now you said temper, and I'm kind of jumping forward here, but I had a question I was going to ask you later. I might as well ask it now because temper was mentioned. I've seen online, is it true? Those little, like, convection ovens can be used to do a temper for a basic knife? You don't need, like, a forge or anything. You can temper it in an oven?
Temper, yes, but not harden. There's a difference.
Okay, walk us through the difference.
Okay, so once you got we were talking about making your template earlier, right? You got your template, you got your bevels. You don't put your bevels right fine. You leave them a little bit proud because you don't want to destroy it when you're heat treating. So basically what you got to do, you take your bar steel that can be hardened, your hardenable piece of steel. You got to get it up to critical temperature, which is roughly around, it's just under 1500 degrees for a carbon steel. But what happens at that state is you can take a magnet, and when you get to past the critical temperature, the magnet doesn't stick to it anymore. So you can actually judge your temperature with a magnet. So once you get to that point, you can take it, you dunk it in oil. I'm not going right into the weeds with different types of oil and different types of whatever,
I
but
know
you
that's a
dunk it in oil.
conversation for another day.
Yeah. So anyway, you dunk it in oil. Or whatever medium you got. It was different steels are different mediums, but you dunk it, and after that it's hard, but it's too hard. So now you got a hardened piece of steel, but basically you drop it on the cement floor, it's going to crack. So
Because
you got to take
hard
it
makes
and you
brittle. Hard's not
yes,
tough. Hard is brittle.
exactly. So what you got to do now, you got to temper it. You got to actually take it, you put it in an oven at a certain temperature, which is usually around 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and you leave it there for a couple hours, couple of those cycles, and then you get your finished temperature where you want. You can vary it a little bit to get exactly where you want. You get like a kitchen knife, you want it a little bit harder, so you're not going to be prying on it or whatever. Your hunting knives, you want it a little bit tougher, so you're not dealing with a broken knife in the middle of the field, dressing a deer or whatever. So yeah, you can temper in your wife's oven,
While she's
basically.
not home or trying to make cookies.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, you said heat cycles. So that's a term I've seen in the knife making community and stuff like that. What do you mean by heat cycling? Am I bringing it up to that 400-degree temperature and then letting it come down to zero, like room temperature again, or am I
Yeah.
requenching it? What happens in between cycles here?
So when you're tempering, you're bringing it from 0 to 400, and you leave it there for 2 hours. And what you're doing is you're converting. You're taking a lot of the the. I'm getting all jumbled up here, but yeah, you're cycling it. You're retaining austenite is converting, and you're starting to get into a lot of the science part of it here. But
We don't have to go too far into the science. Keep her simple for me, man.
yeah, but yeah, your cycles 2 hours, 2 hours each, and basically you're taking the temper out of it. How can I explain this in a better way here?
I think the idea is as the temperature comes up, it's coming up slow. It's a lot like making that metal cool down slow. You're just not bringing it up to that critical temperature and letting it cool down like we talked about at the start of
Well,
the year.
you're not worried about the rate at this point. You
Okay.
can between your cycles you can quench it in water and whatever else. That's not big of a deal. It's the temperature that's more critical, so you don't go too high because the higher you go, the less hardness you're taking out of it. Obviously, if you go back to your critical temperature, it's softer and it's pretty soft again. So
So by doing the tempering cycles, what you're doing is taking some of the brittleness out of it, which actually makes it more soft, but not so soft that it's going to.
you're taking a lot of the hardness and you're putting some toughness into it.
Gotcha. So there, once again, for anybody out there listening, there is a difference between hardness, softness, and toughness. Softness would be it'd be too soft to do anything. You try to cut something, it's going to basically kill the edge on it. If something's too soft, it
Yeah,
just won't hold an edge.
yeah, exactly. If it's too soft, it won't hold an edge. It's good for you're beating stuff up, but you'll be out sharpening it all the time.
Okay,
And,
fair
then
enough.
the different steels, you're going to get into edge retention. You're going to get into you know wearability and all kinds of other. There's probably be 6 or 7 different traits you can take your steel and you can. They put all these different elements in the steels for whatever you want, right? And then it's up to the knife maker to pick the right steel for what you want to do and get what you want in the end.
And I guess the big thing on what you just said there is there isn't a magic steel. It's you got to find what's going to work for what you want it to do.
That's right.
So, and I guess that comes as you develop into the skill a little bit. Play around with some stuff. You'll figure out what does what. Like you're not going to make a knife out of aluminum, obviously. Yeah, and you're not going to make a good knife out of I can't ceramic. No, I guess they do make ceramic knives. Bad example. Not a
Yeah,
knife maker, as you guys can tell out there. But the point is, different metals are going to give you different things. So you'd use a different metal for, say, a all around bushcrafting knife than you would, say, like a chef knife.
yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, and
So,
that
well, like a chef knife, you want it. You can even vary the heat treat, and you can use the same steel, but vary the heat treats. Or on your bushcraft knife, you bring it down a couple Rockwell points. Rockwell C is the hardness scale for knives or steel in the upper range. So your chef knife, you have it a little bit harder, so you get little better edge retention, and you're not going to be prying on it as much, so you're not as worried about it. And even if you do, the Japanese knives were really hard, and they weren't worried about them chipping. They'd rather have them chip than dull. So they'd have them really hard for the edge retention, but so you'd actually have to resharpen if you got a chip instead of them going dull, right? So and Western chef knives, they don't. We do quite hard, but not quite as hard as the Japanese.
and that's fair. I
As
guess
far
that's
as
going to be a
what
cultural
I
thing
know,
too,
anyway.
right?
Yep.
All right. So I picked your brain pretty hard about metalworking. Let's move on to the leatherworking a little bit, if you're good. Did you have anything else you want to add into the metalwork before we
No,
kind
I'm
of
good.
change gears here?
No,
So,
that's good.
like I said, off the leatherwork there, you do some amazing stuff. Once again, what's some basic tools you could use to get into leatherworking?
Leatherwork's even it's a lot more basic than you'd actually believe. You need something that's going to cut. You need to be able to glue it, and you need to be able to. You can dye it too, and sew it together. So you need an X-Acto knife, glue, contact cement. As far as something that some sort of needle, so you can put your holes in, and some thread. That's
So
that's the
dirt
basic
basic
stuff.
stuff, honestly. I honestly
Yeah.
thought there'd be more to it than that. But obviously, with the bare basics of tools, it's going to be an entry level thing. As you get going, there's going to be some nicer tools. I know there's some fancy tools to give you nice edges, and then you can roll
Yep.
edges and the dies, like you said. How do you work with a piece of leather? Because I've bought leather stock for other projects trying to make stuff, and I found it really hard to work with. Is there a secret to softening it up? I've seen some people like soak in water. Is that a thing, or is there just a certain leather you work for? Walk us through making a knife sheath and what you would look for, say, basically what my knife is here. If you can remember how you did this, what was kind of the process, the thought process that went through for this knife. And if anybody's wondering and wants to see this knife sheath, I definitely recommend you jump onto the YouTube channel and check it out because it's absolutely beautiful.
Well, first things first. You start off, take your knife, and I always start off with a cereal box, with the cardboard, right? Make myself a template, and draw what you want. You kind of put it over towards the leather. The leather's good. I usually work with veg tan leather, which is veg tans. It's when you soak veg tan leather, you can form it. You can actually, when it's wet, you can stamp it, and it holds a stamp. Whereas if you get an oil tan or something like that, it's not quite as easy to work with. It's not going to stay. You're not going to stamp it as well.
So is that how you get
So
these really nice embroiderings in this here? Is that what that
that's
was?
right.
It was wet and then stamped and it
Exactly.
retained it?
Yep.
Oh, so
So
you're
you don't
slipping
actually.
out company secrets now, bud.
Well, it's not really a secret, but so what you do is you take a piece of leather to get your stamping in, and you don't really dunk it in the water. You just take like a sponge or something, and you soak the top of it, and you're trying to get it wet, about 50% into the leather, not all the way through, and then you let it dry. And when it comes back to almost the same color as the original, that's when you're ready to start stamping. And you stamp it, and then you leave it, you let it dry, then you can work on it from there, right? So that's how you do the stamping. But as far as shaping it all the other way, you shape your rough profile. You get your welt like that. Your sheath has a welt, so the blade doesn't cut into the stitches. It's actually going to cut into another. Yeah, yeah. You actually hold it on the edge. You'll actually see there's three. Yeah, There's three layers there.
Yep.
So you put your welt in, you glue them all together, and let the glue dry. You shape it to wherever you want. Punch your holes. I actually use chisels. It's almost like a fork. You could actually sharpen a fork and punch your thread holes in, so you get nice even stamping. And after you learn the saddle stitch, which is pretty easy, it's just interlocking. You get two needles and you just go in and out, in and out, in and out. That's your saddle stitch right to the end. You back up a couple stitches to terminate your stitch. Burn it with a lighter, and after that, you got to dress your edges and stuff. So with leather, you can actually sand it if you want on the edges.
I was going to say, this is very smooth on these edges. It's not a
Yeah.
raw edge at all, is what I was looking at there.
It's burnished. Basically, you take you take some liquid, a little bit of water, and then you can actually get some liquid that actually a burnishing compound or whatever, and you just take a piece of wood or something and you keep on rubbing it, and then actually you'll burnish it and it'll turn right soft. The more you rub, the better it's going to come. Some people use denim. I use wood or antler.
Okay.
And that's it's pretty simple. As far as dyeing, you just get some dye. You can actually make your own dyes and stuff.
I mean, simple or not, I mean, you can't argue with the results. It looks really nice. The question I was going to ask is, how do you know what shape to make this sheath to fit, this knife? Is it just trial and error and it comes with practice, or is there some sort of method you do to make it fit? Because honestly, that's where I came up short.
It's a lot of trial and error. Basically, you got your template, you got your pattern cut out, you're bending everything over, you're holding it together with clamps, and you're putting the knife in and out, trying to get the retaining feature you want. So when you tip the sheath over, it doesn't fall out, right? So you can stretch leather, but you can't shrink it.
Okay, and that's something worth noting, because I was going to say, do you do this and then, I don't know, get the leather wet? Because I assume as it's wet, it swells, then as it dries, it shrinks, or
no?
That's not the case.
No, but what you can do is when you get it wet, if you can wrap your knife in cellophane or something, so you're not going to damage your knife. You wrap it in cellophane. You actually get your sheath wet, put the knife in, and you basically wet form the sheath around the knife, and you can get you form it in a way that it's going to retain the knife in the sheath, and it'll dry hard. So after you do that, you want to use like a beeswax treatment of some sort. You can get some waterproofing and stuff, and beeswax compound will actually harden the leather.
So what did you use to seal this leather? Because I've gotten it wet. I've actually fallen in water with this, and it's still retaining its shape all well. I assumed if, by the process you just said, if it wasn't treated, if it got wet again, a lot of this detailing stuff would start coming out, but this has held up great.
I probably use Snow Seal or something like that on there, which is a wax-based thing. You put it on with a heat gun. I've actually taken raw beeswax and melted it with a heat gun, put it on in a melted form, used the heat gun to soak everything in again, and did that to leather sheaths too. Then just put a little bit of oil and stuff on the top of it. So.
No, and like I said, whatever you put on this, I swear by its quality. I show more people this sheath than anything else, to be honest with you, simply because it's a lovely piece of work. And honestly, it was very reasonably priced. It escapes me at the moment, but that was the other thing that I specifically remember. It was reasonably priced. And for anybody out there that's listening, if they do want to check out your page or something like that, I know this is a loaded question, and we talked about this before we came on. If somebody wants a custom knife, I know the range is going to be from wherever to wherever, depending on how intricate they want it. But for a basic bushcraft knife, there in and about. And anybody listening, this is not the price. Don't call Jamie and say, "Oh yeah, they said it was going to be whatever price on the podcast." No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying what's a average price for an average knife. And I know the sky can be the limit and the bottom can be the limit too.
Well, I mean, my range is I'm starting 350, 375 for bushcraft hunting knife, and going up from there depending on what you want. I mean, you can go get a piece of antler, that's worth $500 just for your handle. So you can't get that for a $300 knife, or you can get a different exotic woods or whatever. But my prices start there, and then we start talking about handle material and what you want and all this kind of stuff, and if you need anything special or customizations and everything else. As far as leather work, I mean, I for a basic sheath like that, I can't remember what it was, 65, $75 or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was under 100, to be honest with you, because I thought it was great. Yeah. Hey, Chris, I was just starting to wonder where you were, man. I didn't see any comments come up. Welcome to the show. I knew you'd try and jump in for this one. That's one thing we didn't talk about, actually, Jamie, and you mentioned it right there, is handles. Handles can be a very intricate part of the knife. I know me, I'm just going to run to the wood pile, and I'm going to grab something out of that and cut it up with a bandsaw and try my best. But what are some good woods, and where do you get your woods? Do you do the same thing, just whatever wood you have happen to lay around that makes you happy, or...
Oh, well, I mean, a lot of the woods that I use actually came from my wood pile, believe it or not. But that's a lot of curly maple. But other than that, I'm going to. There's a couple specialty wood stores in town here that I go to, or you can go to any knife supplier or whatever, and they sell you scales, and then you can get into synthetics and whatever else. So that's.
See, you and I would have made great friends back in the early 2000s. I used to be a scaler, and what we did was wood veneers. Did a lot of nice ashes, curly maple, curly birch, bird's eye maple, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But, and if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about there, that's a whole other discussion too. But just search some of those terms.
Actually, if you look on this side, all that stuff there, way over there, that's all handle material.
But you don't have to get these. Actually, you said antler, which is real interesting. Can you just use antlers off a deer, or do you have to get some specific type of antler?
No, deer antler works fine.
All right, fair enough.
If you can grab it, and you can find especially with deer antler, since it's always got a curve everywhere, you got to find a spot that's whether you're right-handed or left-handed, and it fits comfortably in your hand.
Do you find antlers hard to work with because of that problem?
I find I'm fussy enough where I got to find the right piece.
And that's fair.
You got to find it, and you got to have the right diameters. It's got to be the right diameter in the right spot. Then you got to deal with the pith in the center so that if you do sand into it, you're not sanding into that soft spot so it's not visible, right? That's something that I had to learn the hard way.
I was just going to ask how sanding went with the deer antler, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Let's see. Chris Lovelace, is there a website, and do you ship to the US of A? So I'm going to let you answer that, Jamie.
Yeah, I'll ship just about anywhere. I actually have knives in the UK. I've got quite a few in the States. Michigan, Ohio, all the way down California, out west in Canada, Fort Mac, BC. So I got them everywhere. So, yeah, no problem sending to the States.
And if you're wondering there, Chris, he has a Facebook page. Do you have anything other than the Facebook page or just the Facebook page?
Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. I keep forgetting about the Instagram. And I'll include the links to both of those in the description of the video, as well as I'll include in the description of the audio file that goes out to all our major platforms there. I do have the Facebook page up here on the right beside us. And once again, I never replaced Ben's name for Jamie's name, so Jamie is the new Ben for the segment here. But anybody that's looking at our videos, you're in for an eye treat here. Look at some of these things. These are absolutely amazing. I assume the knife block wasn't you, but maybe it was.
I made the knife block too. I didn't make the knife I didn't make the cutting block, but I made the block that's holding the knives,
Oh,
solid walnut block.
awesome job. I'm sorry then.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this is your stamp here, the Bluefish. And it was one of the things I said we may talk about. So why don't you walk us through it while we're looking at some of your samples here? How did you come up with the name Bluefish?
Well, I was never into sport fishing as a very young child, but when in my teenage years, I was living in Yarmouth, that's where I lived, down in a Acadian community, Wedgeport. But in the summers, the bluefish, I think they call them the Boston bluefish, would run up in the warmer waters in the summertime. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a bluefish or actually went chasing them with rod and reel, but it's like a 3 foot piranha, and you're trying to catch them on a rod. And so I just got obsessed with trying to chase these bluefish, and you could only fish them for a couple of weeks a year, so it just always stuck with me. As far as the swordfish, I was a commercial fisherman for quite a few years, and we used to chase swordfish, and it reminds me of home since I'm away from that community now, working in the city and whatever else. I mean, it's a part of home, right? I could have put a lobster on there, but swordfish is fun.
No, I like the story behind that, honestly, and that's unique to you. You know what I mean? There's a lot of companies that use a lobster here in Nova Scotia. If anybody doesn't know, Nova Scotia, we're pretty famous for three things: forestry, fishing, and farming. If you weren't doing one of those three growing up, you basically weren't from Nova Scotia. But I am going to put you on the spot a little bit, Jamie. I notice a video here on your Facebook page, if anybody's watching, of a folding knife. How have you been in pursuing this? Because this was something you were playing with at the time, which was this was back in March. How has that developed along for you? Can people now order folding knives from you, or is this something you're still learning from?
It's something that I will. It's a pastime. Let's see if I can hold it up here. So this is my beater.
I love how he says beater, and that knife looks nicer than one of my high-end knives. And you did this all yourself. What'd you use for the handle? If I may ask.
This is a black G10, which is basically like a fiberglass resinous type of material.
All right.
It's a synthetic, so it's gonna last. It's pretty. It sands well. It almost shows like a little bit of a grain to it. It works well.
And I guess that's another part of your bag of skills. You got to know some woodworking for some of these handles, because obviously you can just run out and grab any wood, sand it, and throw it on there. That's fine. But some of the examples we just pulled up there, like there was beautiful. Oh man, there was beautiful grains in some of that stuff. And you made them pop, and you could tell that you roasted some of it and things like that. Like, you got to know what you're doing to get beautiful results like that. So don't be modest on yourself. There's a lot more in your bag of tricks than you're letting on.
Well, the thing with knife handles is everything's got to be, within a 5-inch and 1-inch window, right? So you can get a beautiful piece of wood that looks great on a kitchen counter, but it's not going to look good on a knife because it's the detail's not there. You're actually taking, you got to scale everything down. So to get something nice and small, it's going to have a lot of character to it. That's why a lot of the knife scales are pretty expensive, because you're going to the higher end exotics, so you can get that scale down and get what you want out of it.
And you made a good point there, which is what I was going to allude to towards the end, which we're coming up on here anyway. A lot of people will argue that the cost of a custom knife sometime isn't worth it. But before we go too far down that, give us an idea, Jamie. How many hours do you put into a custom build? And I know that can be anywhere, but on average, what's the least amount you've ever put in? I bet you that number would still stagger people.
Well, even just hand sanding a knife, you're looking at 3 to 4 hours just to get the finish, right? So And if you're counting hours, oven hours, and everything else, I mean, you're into it for. If I started a knife now and I was trying to get it out as fast as I can, it's probably going to be, would I get it done in a day? Probably not 24 hours for the whole process. But the working time can be between 12, 16 to 24 hours, depending on what you're doing.
And that's the thing. That's what I mean. You're not banging these knives out in 2, 3, 4 hours. That might just be the polishing and the detailing.
Yeah.
Like there is time and time, and if it's a custom order specifically, and Jamie doesn't have the creative license just to be like, I'm going to make whatever I want. If he's trying to follow specifications, you're adding more time in. You get to those exotic handles like he was talking about. You're not only into money, you're now into more time because you got to be careful while you're working for that. You buy a
That's
$500
right.
piece of wood, you don't want to screw that up because now you're into
Yeah.
$1,000 worth of wood, and that's
Yeah.
just the knife. And now you're into the leather work, and then once it's all done, you gotta polish it all out and make it look nice before it goes out because I don't think I've ever seen something of yours go out and it wasn't just absolutely A1 quality.
Well, the worst part and the best part of the process for me is when basically the knife, you got to finish the whole knife before you put the handle on. But that's when it's the most delicate. So any little blemish you put on the blade, you're almost, it's taken hours to try to get that out. So you're working the whole handle and everything. You're dealing with abrasives, whether it's on a belt grinder, you're doing it by hand or whatever, and you're trying to protect that blade because you've already got it up to, 600, 800 or 1,000 grit, the hand sanded. You don't want to touch it. You don't want to mar it with your fingernail because you get the scratches going the wrong way. It just, it takes the knife maker and, the hearts just sink because how much work you got to put back into it to get it back out there. But, you do it. You just keep going around in a circle and you're chasing your defects. And there's defects in every knife, whether you're this, how big are the defects and how well you can hide them, basically.
And that's fair. And I mean, once again, it's just, it was staggering how much time goes into some of this stuff. And I remember once again at the Bushcraft gathering, stuff like that, we've had a couple blacksmiths stop in and they were just working on stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to watch this guy make a knife. And I was expecting him to start with a chunk of metal, and by the time it was over, there'd be, something that resembled a knife. And hours in, there's still not even a decent representation of a knife going. And this individual was still like, nah, no, that's still not quite right. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're looking at. But that's the thing.
Yeah.
There's so much time, so much care. The quality of the materials going in, it all costs money. And that's why custom knives do cost a little bit of money. But you definitely get that out in the other end. You get a one-off. Even if Jamie was to make two of the exact same knife, I can guarantee you put them side by side, they're not going to be the same. Just like Jamie said, there's always little minute differences and things like that.
And another thing with custom knives that a lot of people don't realize or they don't think of is it's like buying a car. You want to go in the woods and if you want to go four-wheel driving, and you're not going to buy a Ferrari, but they sell Ferraris and they sell trucks, so you can get either, but you can't get both out of the same vehicle. You can't get the performance out of a Ferrari when you need the 4x4. That's the way that I look at knives. When I ask you what do you want to do with your knife, well, I want a bushcraft knife. I want it to be tough. Okay, so I put a little bit more meat on the edge or whatever, or do you want a backwoods slicer? Well, I can make you two exactly the same knives, but I can grind them differently, and one's gonna be great for beating on, one's gonna be great for slicing your steak or whatever, but they're one's a 4x4 and one's a Ferrari. You know what I mean? The same knife. It's just all in the characteristics. And
that's a great point to make, and one I never even thought about is, I imagine you've heard this before. You've asked the question, what kind of knife do you want? I want a knife that does everything. There's not really a knife that does everything.
No.
So, and that's a great point. We are coming up on the end here, but I am going to give you a spotlight here for a second, Jamie. Give us a story. And something that sounds like it's going to be a great story, hopefully you can think of one, is give us a time when you were close to the end of a knife and it all fell apart on you? Just to give an idea of what can happen. Can you think of something like that?
I think it's probably when I started experimenting with fillet knives. Fillet knives, I want nice, bendy, flexy fillet knife, right? And in the last couple of years, I've been pushing myself to go thinner and thinner and thinner all the time. So sitting down with a fillet knife and you get it nice, because it's not just about being thin, it's about the geometry of going to getting your flex where you want. So you get it a little bit thinner in the end if you want more flex at the end, or you get it more symmetrical if you want more of a belly bend or whatever. But you start playing around with it and start pushing it a little bit too far, and all of a sudden, well, you went too far, and you got to start all over again, right? It's all about experimentation. You sit back and you cry a little bit, and you pick up your heart off the floor, and you keep on going.
Because much like the leather, as you were saying, you can grind metal out or flatten metal out, but you can't put metal back easily.
No, you can't.
And that's
not easily.
And I could just imagine you got a little too thin, and it either became too floppy or it must have snapped or something. Did it?
Oh yeah. Well, I just pushing it against the table and just kind of went a little bit too far.
And she got a little too thin, but I mean, and if that was to happen, you were making somebody else's knife, you're basically back to square one.
That's right.
And you know what I mean? That's the reality of the work you do. That could happen. That was with a fillet knife and kind of an extreme example, which is perfect, exactly what I was looking for. But the reality is something out of the realm of, reasonableness could happen to that knife. He may be walking it over to do a final quench or something like that, and it falls on the floor and you put a big nip in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he did not expect that to happen.
Another bad one is when you get it, you're almost done. You don't quite got it hand sanded yet, but you get it to the grinder, and say if you're sharpening on the grinder, and you've got a fine belt on, because when you got a fine belt on, you want it to run slow because you got more abrasive. Because if you run fast, it's going to get hotter. But if you run a little bit too fast on a little bit too fine of abrasive, and you turn the edge blue, then it's done. You got to start all over again.
I've seen this before. On stuff I've been working with. So if that happens, and this could be some of the problem I had, there's no way to get rid of that.
No, it's done. You're done. You got to start all over.
I think I know why some of my knives haven't turned out. I was just like, oh, that's pretty. I went on about my business.
Yeah.
But
and that's why I don't sharpen on the belt sander. I actually sharpen by hand. I actually made my own jigs and sharpened with diamond abrasives by hand. So I can control exactly what angles I'm putting on it.
And once again, that's where that quality is going to shine through, because you're getting it exactly as you want it. It's as slow as you want it. You're getting a way finer edge, way less heat, I assume, which is going to create a tougher edge. Or more specifically, it's not going to hurt the steel as much, which once you got that steel to the way you want it, you're not affecting that as much. So, but that takes time. You can slap it off with a belt grinder and like how much ever, but I guarantee it's 4, 5, 6 times longer doing it by hand.
Oh, it's a lot longer. I mean, you could probably sharpen a knife on a belt grinder with the right abrasives in 3 to 5 minutes, and in some knives are taking me over an hour. So,
and that's fair enough. So once again, folks, if you're wondering or wanting a custom knife, that's where your money's going. It's not that Jamie is or anybody like Jamie is gouging you. I don't think they are. When you truly actually take the time to see how the knife is from your mind to your hand, there is a lot that goes on in between. And I'm not even going to profess I know what half of it is.
No, if I was in it for the money, I'd be working on leather. Honestly, I got the passion for the knives, and the leather just comes with it. But you can make more money per hour with the leather than you can with the knives. So,
and that's fair. So we are coming up on our 1 hour there, Jamie. I thank you very much for joining me here at Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Just before we sign off, once again, tell people how they can find you, how they can contact you, anything you want to say, and get it out there for people to basically get back to you.
Sure. Bluefish Knife and Tool Facebook group is where I'm at, and Bluefish 6900 is my Instagram. So either one of those, and contact me. And you can find me on Facebook too, but whatever, it all
I
works.
Most times I'd say go through the Facebook page. That way you're just not getting a whole bunch of stuff hounded on your personal page.
Yeah,
And I once again I'm going to include the link to the Facebook page, to the Instagram. I just jotted it down there. It'll be on the description of the video here. And any of our listeners out there that are listening, I know some of you listen on your way to work and things like that. Don't fret if you hear it. Check back in the description of the audio, and I will make sure that the link for Jamie's Facebook page is there and his Instagram. And people could just message you on either one of those and just to say hi, appreciate your work. Definitely give a thumbs up and a like there. But if you are looking for something, definitely reach out to Jamie. As he said, he's shipped everywhere, so there's no reason that you can't have a beautiful knife of your own made from Jamie.
yeah. One thing with me is it is a hobby. My family comes first, so sometimes it takes me a while. But I almost never have knives readily available, so it's always, you know, you're going to wait a little bit one way or another. But I usually got spots, and I can accommodate usually most schedules.
And that's the thing. That's the other thing with custom knives. It's kind of a give-take relationship with a good knife maker. If somebody's just banging them out, that's one thing. But somebody that actually takes a little time, it is a hobby, as Jamie said here. But you can see it in his work. Trust me. If you're wondering and you haven't seen any of the pictures I've put up, I can tell you right now, you can see the love, care, and just the passion that goes into the work he does. And I'm basing this just off the weather I've had here, but I have seen a couple of his knives. I believe you must have sold them to him. I don't think they stole them from you or anything like that. But I mean, it's absolutely amazing work. And it's funny enough, just the last thought here is I do remember when you first mentioned that you were doing metalwork, leatherwork, stuff like that, and I was kind of looking at your page to where you've come now. And over that amount of time, your work has done nothing but get better, in all honesty. A lot more intricate. I've seen some beautiful designs you put in metal. The handles you do are absolutely amazing. The leatherwork's breathtaking for some of it. Some of it can be as simple or as intricate as you want. Just all of it just drools with the passion you put into this stuff.
Oh, thank you. I've always striving for the next. Well, it's almost for the next high. You go a little bit further, see how far you can push yourself without taking too big of a bite, right? So just keep going.
But that's how we learn and grow, right?
That's right. Yep.
All right. Well, once again, thank you very much, Jamie. If anybody has any questions, comments, or stuff like that, once again, you can get a hold of Jamie on his own Facebook stuff there and Instagram, or if you want, shoot us messages and I'll make sure they get back to him as well. If you're contacting me, hopefully it's about the podcast and questions that way. If you want a knife, hopefully you're contacting Jamie, because you don't want anything I'm going to give you. I can tell you that right now. But until next week, everybody get out there, have fun, play safe, and we'll see you next time. Night, everybody.
Take care.